Look, California, this is the state of your forests. I'm here at Sierra County, not far off of Highway 49, about the 4,000-foot elevation. Lots of dead beetle blight trees, here, there, and here, surrounded by healthy trees with an overabundance of understory growth and dry brush. Unmanaged forests. To blame this all on climate change without the admission of proper forest management is missing the point completely. These forests were completely altered all the way back to the gold rush here in California and throughout much of the West. What we have now is the collision between 100 years of fire suppression at all costs versus about 40 or almost 50 years of radical environmentalism preventing the proper management of these forever altered forests. So get off of your political bias, get out here and manage these forests for a drier, warmer climate. This is Juan Brown in the Blanco Lirio satellite headquarters in Hong Kong, People's Republic of China, after a relaxing 15-hour flight on the 777 from Los Angeles. This is all part of my regular routine as a 777 first officer for the airlines. But back home, there's lots to talk about and update on the Camp Fire in Northern California. Let's get right to it. First, I want to thank everybody for the great response on the 747 Global Supertanker video and the reloading of retardant at McClellan Air Force Base. Looks like we garnered quite a few new subscribers. I want to welcome you to the channel here. Normally on this channel we do not discuss politics. However, today is a very historic day in Northern California as President Trump has just got through with his visit of the Camp Fire and seen the devastation firsthand in Paradise, California. More on that later. The numbers coming out of the Camp Fire continue to stagger the imagination. The acreage is up to about 148,000 acres. When this TFR goes away, I'm going to be able to get a chance to fly over it in the Luscombe and show you the size of this fire. But I've mapped it out on the map, and it's going to take me nearly an hour in the Luscombe to circumnavigate the size of this fire. The startling numbers right now are the numbers of missing. The numbers of missing have jumped from 200 to 600 and now to over 1,000. Sheriff Corey Honey has explained that it's kind of difficult to get their arms around these numbers as they're taking data from several different inputs. And they're getting a lot of duplication of effort, a lot of misspelled names, and hopefully those numbers will come down quickly. But regardless, the number of fatalities, that list continues to grow. It is currently up to 71. Remember, these fatalities all occurred on the first day when that fire ripped through Paradise. They're just now discovering all the remains. The fire is about 55% contained. It is just burning out around the edges, and just as we suspected, the fire is heading up the drainages and the heavier timber up the drainages and a more normal fire and wind flow pattern. We'll show you on the map. Here's what the fire map looks like today at 148,000 acres, 17 November. That in blue showing where the fire first came ripping out of the canyon from its ignition source right about here, burning down the towns of Paradise and portions of Magalia. Now the fire is burning out around the edges, much more slowly in heavy timber as we assume a more normal westerly wind flow. This section of the fire is that which is contained. 47,000 folks evacuated, still over 1,100 folks in evacuation shelters. I believe that number's got to be quite a bit more. There are 5,500 personnel on the fire right now. Just as we suspected on day one from the various pilot reports I was getting at the tanker base, the number of structures now is listed at 9,700 homes, 336 commercial buildings. Listening to the Butte County Housing Authority, it sounds to me like Butte County is virtually in a humanitarian crisis mode with the number of instantly homeless people in Butte County. Butte County is one of the poorer counties in California. It already had a 100% occupancy rate, much of that probably due to the fact of the rebuilding of the Oroville spillways. A lot of any available housing has been taken up by the employees there. And now they've got a heck of a situation trying to get these evacuees housed. I'm hoping soon that the FEMA will be able to relieve that stress. Folks are getting through to FEMA right away and getting some quick relief and getting in line to get all the FEMA relief that they are going to eventually need. What I'm interested in seeing now is the FEMA trailers. Is that going to be a short gap measure to help get these people housed in the short term? And of course, there's growing frustration among the folks that are displaced as to the amount of time that it's taking before they are being allowed to go back into the area to see if their house is still standing or not, and if they can recover anything from what's left. It's just taken responders so much time to comb through what's left, to determine the number of fatalities, and make the area safe before they can allow the affected people back into the burned out area. The air quality continues to be a problem, especially in the Sacramento Valley, as we're getting into our wintertime pattern with a high pressure overhead. That just puts a lid on any wind, and any smoke that comes out of the mountains from the campfire is just settling into the Sacramento Valley. AQI numbers, air quality numbers as high as 300 and 400 in the very hazardous zone are being recorded. When I departed Sacramento for my commute down to Los Angeles for this trip, Sacramento was down to a 1/2 mile visibility in smoke. Here's the satellite view from 17 November, where we've had a little bit of improvement. There's Sacramento. I think that's Interstate 80, hard to tell, and a 1/2 mile or less than smoke. And downtown San Francisco, the Coit Tower. Smoke extending all the way out to the coast and beyond. There is hope in the forecast for perhaps a little bit of rain later on next week. Just before I left for this trip, a longtime Blanco Lirio viewer who's been watching the entire Orville situation since he lives right in Orville, Dean Strait, turns out to be one of the heroes who works. He's a male nurse that works at the Feather River Hospital in Paradise. He was there at work Thursday morning when this thing broke out, and he worked all morning to help evacuate the patients from the hospital, risking his own life and limb as traffic continued to back up during the day, leaving him to evacuate Paradise when it was almost much too late. But he survived. He got out just fine. His house is not in the area. His house is fine. He had a hell of a story to tell, and he needed to tell it. I mean, I know a lot of us in stressful jobs are, well, let's see, how can I put it? You could tell he'd been through something terribly traumatic, and he just needed to talk, and I just let him and talk for 25, almost 30 minutes. He told the entire harrowing story. We're going to reconnect after this trip. He wants to tell his story directly to you because there's a lot of important information to learn from this first-hand account of escaping the firestorm in Paradise. This brings us up to our next update, PG&E. Fire investigators are still investigating the cause of this fire, and they're focusing on a high-tension power line, transmission line, near the town of Pulga, where this fire originated. PG&E has been calling all around Northern California this year, explaining to people that they may be shutting down power in the event of high wind events. And that was true just before this fire broke out. However, they did not shut down the power in the area where this fire started. As a part of recent legislation, PG&E was given $1 billion to help fix up their infrastructure and clean up the vegetation around the power lines. Part of that included the removal of an old device called reclosers. Reclosers are an older device that were used on power lines and apparently are still in use in the power line in question that may have very well possibly started this fire. Reclosers are a device that can prove that a power line is actually down or a circuit is open. When a power line goes down, these reclosers send 3 bursts of energy, 3 bursts of electricity back through the line to determine if that line is truly open or down. Unfortunately, if the line is truly down or it's an open circuit, a broken wire, that can send sparks right down on top of the vegetation that the line fell on and ignite a fire. Those reclosers, they were working on removing them, getting them out of the PG&E system, but I believe they were still a part of the system in the transmission line that folks are focusing on as part of the investigation of the start of this fire. The idea of reclosers was to automatically test the line and minimize blackouts without having to send a service crew out for a minor service disruption. So where does this leave PG&E? This is a hell of a huge problem for California. PG&E controls all the electricity in virtually Northern California, millions and millions of customers. Last year, California suffered over $17 billion in wildfire losses from the wind-driven events, primarily from the wind-driven events in October of last year. It's been determined that PG&E was responsible for several, if not the majority, of those wind-driven events in October. PG&E at the time had about $900 million worth of insurance. It's estimated that last year's wildfires, PG&E may be on the hook for as much as $15 billion worth of damage. This year, the wildfire rough count so far looks like about another $15 billion worth of losses and costs. How much of this PG&E will be on the hook for is yet to be determined. As of now, PG&E has already gone through about $1.1 billion worth of insurance capacity that they had. Their stock prices have absolutely plummeted right off the charts. Where does this leave Northern California for power, PG&E? How are they going to weather this storm? What are we going to do with PG&E? What are we going to do for power in Northern California? And of course, the other question is housing insurance. That's going to be another huge other shoe to drop as a result of these wildfires. Speaking of Orville, some of you were asking, what's the impact of this fire on operations at Orville and on the construction on the Orville spillways? And 2, is this power line that's in question that may have started this fire part of the Orville Hyatt power plant structure? The second question first, the power lines involved with this fire are known as the Caribou-Palermo transmission line. That's the transmission line that runs all the way down the Feather River Canyon to the town of Palermo, south of Oroville. So no, though it crosses the Hyatt power plant transmission line, it is not part of it. It is certainly not part of the Orville transmission line reroute. Remember, when they were rebuilding Orville, they rerouted the Hyatt power plant transmission line. That's called the Hyatt Table Mountain. That runs just from the Hyatt power plant to Table Mountain substation due west of Orville a few miles. That's a 230,000 volt transmission line. That was rerouted around the Oroville Spillway and Emergency Spillway Complex. The power lines that we're talking about with the campfire are completely separate. That's the Caribou-Palermo 115,000 volt line. Here's that map of the transmission lines again with the Caribou-Palermo line running down the Feather River Canyon and picking up as many as 10 small power plants along the way. And because the Feather River Canyon is all granite, it makes burying these transmission lines virtually impossible. And here's where the Hyatt Power Plant to Table Mountain Substation power lines cross the Caribou-Palermo line and were recently rerouted. Now, as far as this fire affecting things at Oroville, yes, they did have to stop construction on the spillways due to the smoke, hazardous smoke air quality index. So construction has come to a stop. I'm not sure if they are still stopped or not. What are the long-term ramifications? Folks are asking, what about mudslides impacting operations at Orville? Well, the mudslide situation, that's more of a Southern California thing. That's going to be a given this winter in Southern California. Those folks living in the alluvial fans at the base of the Malibu Hills, if and when they get a sudden rainstorm, they will have mudslides. Not to be confused with what's going on here in Northern California at all. Here in Northern California, the Feather River Canyon is a solid granite canyon. It's what they call a very flashy canyon. That is, when it rains, it runs off quickly, naturally, because of the hard granite surface. That's another reason why Orville Dam is so vital to life below the dam. That's, again, what makes the Central Valley habitable, the Orville Dam. So I doubt that this fire is going to have a lot of mudslide impact on the Feather River Canyon. However, one thing that I can see as being a problem is all this debris flow. These huge logs and timber are going to come flowing down the Feather River Canyon if and when we get some heavier rains and into the Orville Reservoir. Now, folks at DWR have a very interesting way of controlling that debris. That debris is a problem because it can get hung up in the spillway gates at Orville. But they've got a way using boats and floaties to corral these, they corral huge portions of these of this floating debris, drag it to the shore of Orville Reservoir, and then as the water level drops throughout the season, that material sets on the ground, and then they are able to eventually either burn or mulch the material on the shores of Orville Reservoir before it becomes a hazard into the spillway gates. And of course, the hazard that it proposes to the spillway gates is that it can jam them up and you can once again lose control of your spillway structure or damage the gates. President Trump visited the town of Paradise. He landed Air Force One at Beale Air Force Base. There was a huge TFR covering much of Beale Air Force Base and the Paradise fire area. From Beale Air Force Base, he was transferred onto, I think they call it Marine One, the Marine helicopter, and headed up to the fire area. As a former 141 Air Force pilot, we did an awful lot of presidential support, and I know these operations are huge logistic nightmares, and everybody involved did a great job getting the president in and through the disaster area. It was very important, I think, for the president to come see firsthand the destruction of this fire. Joining the president was Governor-elect Gavin Newsom and the current governor of California, Jerry Brown. Both sides had some good things to say that indicated that maybe they're going to actually come together and put some of their political bias aside. President Trump mentioned that environmental groups have seen the light. Governor Brown was quoted as saying, "There are many factors involved in these forest fires, and we need to open our minds." I do hope Governor Brown opens his mind as well as to what all the different solutions are. President Trump mentioned he had $500 million built into the latest farm bill specifically for forest management, what he's calling a whole new category of money to be spent on forest management. So again, I want to welcome all the new subscribers to this channel. Normally we don't get into politics around here, but in some cases, like today, it's unavoidable. But in my opinion, this is more common sense than politics. I hope to do a follow-up video on the 777, that's what I fly, on the 747 global supertanker, and when things settle down enough to get a hold of the flying crews themselves, get up in the cockpit, and we'll get all your flying and technical questions answered on that. And we're also looking forward to hearing from Dean Strait his harrowing escape story from the firestorm in Paradise, his first-hand account. See you here.
Bye.